Hey, from Stonemaier Games, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk about our final new game of 2024, Stamp Swap. If you have our e-newsletter, you may have seen that this is the game that I'm announcing today. This is from designer Paul Solomon and illustrator Connor Gillette, and of course, the amazing team at Automa Factory for solo mode. We'll talk about the solo mode later. There are some interesting challenges that they encountered in this drafting, I cut, you choose tile placement game. But yeah, this is our final new game of 2024. And so I announced it in today's newsletter. If you don't have that newsletter, you can subscribe. It's also in the description of this video below. And I see a lot of people in the comments here who are already excited about this game, including, I saw a comment from you. There you go. Paul Solomon, designer Paul Solomon. He is probably best known for Honey Buzz. He also was instrumental, I think, one of the co-designers of Genotype. And he's a friend here in St. Louis. I get to play disc golf with Paul and games with Paul from time to time and play test various games with Paul. Along with Matthew, I see Matthew here. He's in our disc golf group as well. We have a group of people who play disc golf and also love games. So we have two great things to talk about whenever we're out on the disc golf course. So I see Frank West here today as well. Thank you, Frank. Frank really recently announced his new game just a few days ago. Frank, it's really neat to see the card dancing mechanism that you discussed in your most recent video about that game. But yeah, I am so excited about this game. I love I Cut You Choose. So for a long time now, I've been waiting to find the right I Cut You Choose game for Stonemaier Games, and Paul designed it in Stamp Swap. It's mostly a simultaneous game. There are a few elements that aren't simultaneous, but most of it is simultaneous. Like when you're grouping your stamps together, when you're placing your stamps, when you're choosing which goals to score. And there's so many great choices that come from the tiles that you draft and how you choose to group them, including a little twist. I won't go into too many details about it, but I love this little twist in I Cut You Choose in Stamp Swap in particular, where you're drafting these things and then you're dividing those things into two groups, but you could choose one of those things to reserve just for yourself. So even in this I Cut You Choose game, you get to say, I don't want to give this thing up. This is something that's really important to my strategy. I'm going to keep this. There's an exception to that that's noted on the player mat. You can't keep a rare stamp. There are these gold foil rare stamps that are worth a lot of points. You can't reserve them for yourself. They have to go into the groups, but everything else is eligible for the reserve slot. Tony asked a question that we are anticipating called, how is this game different from Penny Black? Penny Black is another stamp-themed game where you are placing stamps on a grid. But beyond that, everything else is different. I actually have not played Penny Black, but what I've looked into it is that it is very different mechanically than Stamp Swap. Stamp Swap is a tile drafting and also card drafting game. There's some engine building elements to it, some light engine building elements, where you have a vastly different spatial puzzle each game based on the goals in that game. And you have a choice as to when you score those goals. That's a key choice in the game. There's also the I Cut You Choose element, which I don't think is present in Penny Black. And just the meaning behind where you're placing stamps in Stamp Swap is very different than Penny Black as well. Penny Black, I would say, this game, Stamp Swap, is on the lighter side of our games. From what I understand, Penny Black is really, really light. But fortunately, there aren't too many stamp-themed games out there. So two stamp-themed games can hopefully coexist and maybe even complement each other. If you play Stamp Swap and you really enjoy it, really enjoy the theme, maybe you can go discover Penny Black as well. Let's see. Aaron says, would you consider Stamp Swap a polyomino game? Kind of makes sense that you wanted to revisit polyomino games as a topic recently. That's true. Yeah, I did do a recent video on polyomino games that has not been released yet, but it will be released soon. So the stamps in Stamp Swap are different sizes. I'll hold up some examples here so you can see. They aren't Tetris shapes as I commonly think of polyomino games, but they are different cells. So like the smallest stamp are the forever stamps. So they're these one little cells here. And then you have stamps. This is the small square, and you can see that a small square is essentially 4 forever stamps put together. So in a way, it is polyomino. I probably won't mention it as a polyomino game because of how people typically think of polyomino games. It could be confusing because the tiles are square. There are bigger squares. You can see here's a big square. There's a small square, a big square. And then there are these Oh, here's actually a rare stamp. I'm glad I pulled this one out. So these are these rectangles. So this is the size of 2 squares, and this is the gold foil that you might find in on all the rare stamps. And then there are, and actually many of these stamps, like that one that I just held up, they are actually 2 small squares stuck together, a little bit like between 2 cities where we have the dual tiles. And then last we have a slightly smaller rectangle. So arguably polyomino, but just not what people would traditionally think of in terms of polyomino games. Yeah. I'm pulling all these out of the insert. I don't know if you can see the insert in some of the photos that we posted, but there's an insert tray included in the game for easy setup, easy play, especially since every round you kind of have to set up a different array of tiles on the board. Nate says, have you ever made a blog post of a top 10 style video about games play tested at Stonemaier Games Design Day that went on to be published by someone else? You know, there probably are enough games at this point, given that we've done Design Day for like 10 or 11 years at this point, where I could go back and do that. I actually really like that idea for a video. I'm going to make a note of that. So games that were at Design Day, yeah, how do I phrase this? That went on to be published. Yeah. Design. And even though Stonemaier Games host Design Day, a lot of the games that are featured there are self-published by the designers or published by another publisher, or end up being published by another publisher. So yeah, I really like that. And that actually works well because our Design Day is coming up in the very near future. In case we have any questions about it, I do have the newsletter up here on the other page. So we might go through it a little bit. Here's what Stamp Swap looks like, some information about it. September 4th is the launch date for it. And like Stonemaier Games products, we are ready to ship it, or we will be ready to ship it on September 4th. We're starting on September 4th to Stonemaier Games champions, and then followed a few weeks later by non-champions. And tied into that, I know recently, that is our commitment to shipping. Recently, shipments have taken a lot longer to get to Europe than normal because they're actually going all the way around Africa instead of through the Red Sea. And so the Rolling Realms Redux shipment to Europe is due to arrive later this week and is due to ship out to customers next week. I really appreciate your patience in Europe. I know this is becoming old, probably not just for Stonemaier Games, but for other shipments that you're waiting for as well. But the good news is Stamp Swap is on those shipments that are arriving this week. And so that means that you won't have to wait any longer after September 4th when we launch Stamp Swap on our web store. Also, I mentioned in the newsletter, I'm not going to go into what the apiary expansion is yet. I'll talk about that in about 2 weeks. But we will be launching the apiary expansion and Stamp Swap at the same time. So if you want both of those products, you can consolidate them into the same shipment on September 4th. Devil's Treasure says, is there a disc golf board game confirmed? There are some disc golf board games out there that exist, but I love playing disc golf outdoors, not on the tabletop. And I would say if you want to play disc golf on the tabletop, play Crokinole. I think Crokinole is an excellent kind of twist on disc golf that's present on the tabletop. We're not making a disc golf themed game. That's Stonemaier Games. Designer Paul chimes in here. He says, as a mathematician, I do consider squares and rectangles to be polyominoes, though there are sometimes when a set of rectangles should not be considered polyominoes. So there's the mathematical answer there. Here's Chris chiming in too, a fellow designer, fellow publisher who also recently started a YouTube channel, which I'm really excited about, Chris. I think you saw my comment there. Steve says, when will it go on sale on the Stonemaier Games web store? So yeah, I'm a few minutes behind on comments, but yes, September 4th is when Stamp Swap will appear on the Stonemaier Games web store. I'll keep holding this up. Why not? Let's see. I'll scroll down a little bit. Oh, here's Paul chiming in about Penny Black. I think Paul actually has played Penny Black. He says it's much lighter and has much less player interaction. There's a lot of interaction in terms of the drafting, the I cut you choose element of Stamp Swap, how much you need to start paying attention to other players, especially in terms of what they've scored and what they haven't scored yet, because that is a choice each round. And also the forever stamps. There's a little bit of a majority game there. Who has the most forever stamps in the game? But Paul does say he has both and he enjoys both. Fortunately, I think they can coexist on the tabletop. Kieran says, what would you consider as the component hook in Stamp Swap? I would say those gold foil stamps. One I held up to the camera a minute ago. I'll leave that out. But the rare stamps, these were inspired a little bit by another company that Paul is involved with. That is Elf Creek Games. They have Merchants of the Dark Road, and they have these gold foil treasure tiles in Merchant of the Dark Road. And that really inspired me to make these rare stamps, which is, I don't know if you can tell, but this is a chocolate. So the rare stamps are chocolate themed. But yeah, this gold foil is on the rare stamps is the component hook for Stamp Swap. Ian says, is there Altama? Of course, there's Altama. Yeah, there is a solo mode, and it was a pretty big challenge to do I Cut You Choose in a way that feels like you're operating against an intelligent opponent. And Altama Factory, as usual, I'm confident did a wonderful job with that. We'll talk about that in the design diary entry next week. But I did put the Altama rulebook plus the multiplayer rulebook on Dropbox. So you can link to that through our website. Go check that out. Check out those rulebooks if you are curious to see how the game works. But I will also be describing it piecemeal over the next 10 days in the design diary post and over some videos as well. So if you want to just wait and see how I describe it. There's also a little infographic in the newsletter here. I'll show it on the screen here. Here is the infographic. So this actually describes pretty much everything you need to know about the game in one neat little infographic. If you want to check that out. Ray says, what set this game apart when you made the initial decision to collaborate with Paul on it? It's a good question, Ray. I mean, I think a big part of it is that I really, really do love I Price You Choose and I Cut You Choose. This is I Cut You Choose in Stamp Swap, not I Price You Choose. And so I've had that in my mind for a while. I've wanted a game with that. And so I've kept an eye on games that appear at Design Day that are submitted to us that have that mechanism. And when I saw how much fun players were having at Design Day with the mechanism, I was really curious about it. I'll talk in the design diaries about how the game evolved over time, because it did evolve some of the tiles and the way they're placed out in the draft and what they mean for the grouping and I Cut You Choose stage. That changed over time. But Paul already had a really solid foundation that people were having a lot of fun with at Design Day. It was one of the highest rated games at Design Day of all time. Although our rating system at Design Day, I think, changed the year that Paul had it there to be less about the quality of the game and more about how ready is this game to be published. Yep. Who's the artist? Yeah, Connor Gillette is the artist. You can see it right here in the box. Connor Gillette. Paul Solomon's the designer. Connor was an amazing artist to work with. He had a huge task ahead of him because he had to create a ton of unique stamps. I think it's around 150 unique stamps. How many do we have here? I don't know if it says on my little thing here. My little infographic. It doesn't say, but it's around 150 stamps, and everyone is unique, and they're grouped in different categories. So we had these big different categories that he had to cover, like animals and vehicles and outer space. And so, yeah, I found it. He was amazing to work with. Highly recommend if anyone's looking for an artist. I know Chad's asking because Chad is also an artist. Joshua is asking that question of how many stamps does the game have? Let's see here. So the forever stamps are not unique. The forever stamps always look like this. That's the infinity symbol. All of the other stamps are unique. And I'll just look at the rulebook to find out. There are 165 stamp tiles. So actually, I was correct. There are 15 forever stamps. Those are all the same. But the other 150 stamps are all uniquely illustrated by Connor Gillette. Yeah. Nate says mixing face up and face down with I Cut You Choose sounds a lot like, or a little like, Tussie Mussy. Any chance there was inspiration there? Possibly, although the game that I think of when I think of face up, face down, and you're right, this was an inspiration, is Sunday Split. You're totally right that Tussie Mussy has that, but Sunday Split is also an I Cut You Choose game, a lighter one based on card drafting or card cutting, and it requires you to put some of the cards face down. And so that was something that I did bring up with Paul after I played the original prototype, or the prototype that he brought to Design Day, about having some stamps be face down. It's a neat twist for I Cut You Choose. It makes you feel a little sneaky because you know some information that other players don't know. Box People says, what was the code name for Stamp Swap? I believe it was Swap. I think it was just Swap. Yeah. That was it. It was a good four-letter. I usually use four-letter words for code names, and it was a good four-letter word, even though it wasn't the name of the game. Let's see, board game design. How much table real estate does Stamp Swap take up? You know, sometimes we put that on the bottom of the box. I don't know if we did it here. So Stamp Swap has 4 or 5 player mats that are around the size of this box. And this box is a wingspan size box. It's around 30 centimeters. And then you have this tray that goes on the table. The tray is about the size of half the box. And then you have the tiles in the middle of the table that are completely flexible in how you put out them, how you put them out there, plus the game board. So I would say total game space, I would say it's, I don't know, it's around, you probably need a 3x3 foot table for most players, but you could play, so this is the board right here. You could probably get away with a slightly smaller space for just 2 players or just 3 players. Yeah, but around a 3x3 foot table is what you're looking for. Valerie says, what came first, the theme, game mechanisms, or the designer? Did the designer approach Stonemaier Games with a prototype? I don't know if Paul necessarily approached this. I think I may have approached him at design day, but I knew Paul was working on this game. We'll talk about this in the design diary post, but Paul did look at coin collecting and stamp collecting. And I think that those themes are where he started, and then he branched off into these designs. And he ended up going with stamp collecting rather than coin collecting. Let's see. Jacob is asking, how big is Paul's current stamp collection? Paul might be able to answer that, or maybe he's already answered that. I'm still a few minutes behind on comments. Paul says, is there any chance of an add-on to add a couple more players? 7 is such a sweet spot for his game nights. I think that is possible. If the game does well and we're looking for future expansions, I think adding more players is feasible. Definitely adds more players, more table space if you do that. But the game actually does scale pretty well in terms of how the tiles are put out there. It uses an event card system where you kind of stagger these event cards to show which tiles are to be placed in the middle of the table in the pool. And so the number of cards that you put out there is equal to the number of players. So if you needed to add more players, you would just put more event cards, and you would just need to make sure there are enough tiles in the game and items in the game, because there are some cards as well that can be drafted for engine building for that. So I think that is feasible for us to possibly explore for those with bigger tables if the game does well. Oh, keep. Okay, so it was. Thank you for correcting this, Karen. So the code name wasn't swap, it was keep. I probably considered swap, but it was too close to the game name. Yeah. Garrett asked Paul, does he have a favorite stamp in the game? I'm curious what Paul will say. I do know that Paul's dog, Bernie, does appear in the game, so that might be Paul's favorite, but it might be another one as well. Photon Mom says, do all the stamps come in the box, or are there collectible stamps that you get separately? Everything is included in the game. In fact, we don't even have any add-ons for the game. We try to make it feel deluxe and special out of the box. So yeah, nothing to collect here. You just get everything in one box right from the start. Chad says, can you ask why you chose the code name? So the code name Keep, now that I've been reminded of what the code name was, it's because I cut you choose. You're keeping certain things and you're giving up other things to the other players. Let's see. Ray says, I know you normally prefer to make games without a round structure. If that makes sense for the game, is this a case of the exception that proves the rule? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always based on what's best for the game. Wingspan, Wormspan, those are round-based games. Even Tapestry has a form of rounds, even though it's an organic form. But in an I Cut You Choose game, I think it's generally pretty important to have a set number of rounds where you're creating a pool of items, you're pulling things from that pool to create groups, and I think Isle of Skye does this really well as well. So yeah, 3 rounds in Stamp Swap. The game really flies by once you know how to play. We put 20 to 60 minutes on the box, which is a pretty broad range, but 60 I think is accurate for a teaching game at higher player counts, and 20 is accurate for when players already know the game and you're playing at lower player counts. And a lot of it is simultaneous, so the game actually, even if you have a full 5 player count, most of it is simultaneous, and so it's going to fly by once players know how to play. Box to People says, will you have a presence at Essen this year? We will. Yeah, Stonemaier Games had a nice big presence at Essen last year, and we'll have a similar presence this year. I won't personally be there, but my coworkers Dave and Alex will be there. People are mentioning the idea of offering collectible stamp tiles for the game, separate from Stamp Swap. I guess that's something we could consider someday, but probably most likely it would be an expansion. There is room in the box for an expansion if we added another little insert with maybe some other categories of stamps. Or just more stamps of the same categories. We'll see. We could probably easily add other sizes of stamps. Paul says that his Bernie Doodle Bernie is one of the red small square stamps. So that one's very special to him. Also the St. Louis Arch. There are also some other Easter eggs found in the game as well. Mark is popping in late at night for Mark. He says, will there be a promo realms release along with the game? No mention in the email, I think. So yes, there will be. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't mention it in the original email, the announcement here, but yes, there will be the final 3 promo realms for a different game, Rolling Realms, will be available at the same time as the Stamp Swap launch on September 4th. That will include a realm for Stamp Swap, and then it will include the other 2 realms that we've revealed in the Stamp Swap Redux. The Rolling Realms Redux Compendium, Brass Birmingham realm, and actually the Genotype realm as well. I believe we waited for that because Paul is involved in that design. So yeah, Genotype, I believe that's right. Genotype, Stamp Swap, Brass Birmingham, those 3 realms on September 4th. Mobile Uploads says, are there any more expansions due to be released soon? Yes, we have the Apiary expansion will launch at the same time as Stamp Swap, September 4th on our web store, both ready to ship immediately after that. We'll talk about that expansion in about 2 weeks. Right now, I'm shining the spotlight on Stamp Swap. Steve says, if the gold foil stamps are chocolate themed, does the rulebook mention chocolate of the day? I don't think it does. It talks about the rare stamps in the rulebook, obviously, but not chocolate of the day. But I might as well mention my chocolate of the day today. What will it be? I was at the grocery store yesterday and I had a hankering for one of those fancy Reese's bars that have like Reese's Pieces and Butterfinger wafers and chocolate. And I had a craving for one of those. So I picked up one of those. They were very rich. And so I only ate about half of it. So I think the rest of that will be my chocolate of the day today. What do you all do? What are you treating yourself with today? I don't have any big question of the day today because mostly I wanted to focus on Stamp Swap. I'll touch upon some other topics real quick, then I'll get back to questions. So the other topics I was going to mention is a friend sent me an appendix plushie that I think is adorable. It's from I Heart Guts. I had my appendix out recently due to an emergency. I had appendicitis. So I thought this was really cute present for someone who has an organ taken out. This line of I Heart Guts has like every organ. So if you have someone who has something removed, you can send them a plushie so they will still have that organ. Thought that was really cute. Some games I played recently were Compile from Greater Than Games. Awesome game. Really cool 2-player lane-based dueling game. Played Captain Flip on Board Game Arena. Really enjoyed that. And I played Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. Cooperative version of Jekyll versus Hyde, a trick-taking game, 2-player trick-taking game. Had a blast with that. And last night I took a few minutes off and played a little bit of Dominion Rising Sun on the digital app for the first time. Really good digital version of Dominion. I really liked it. And I got trounced by the very easy AI in 2 games back to back. But it was a really neat set to check out, Rising Sun. I knew nothing about that going into this game. I did a video this past weekend about pivotal tipping points in games. Speaking of Dominion, well known for its tipping point from engine building, shifting over to getting points. In a blog post about conventions last week. And I've been doing a lot of planning for our Japan trip that's coming up later in late October. Really looking forward to that. I have been to Japan before, but I'm planning it from a different perspective here, trying to see some new places. And I have a newfound respect for why travel agents still exist, because trying to pick out which place to stay out of so many different places to stay and so many different things to do in Japan, even a country that I know fairly well, is a lot. It's a lot to manage. So yeah, those are the little things that I'm going through recently. Let's see. Andrew says, will there be alternate upgrade components, player mats, or different additions to the game? Nope. Just everything, one version of the game, just straight out of the box. We tried to make the game feel nice and feel deluxe at a reasonable cost and price to you. And yeah, so there's just one version of the game. Keep it simple sometimes. I appreciate you asking though, Andrew. I do. But yeah, in this case, just one version for everyone. It is individually numbered. You can see it's out of 23,000 first run copies. And so you can't pick your number, but you can see what number that you get after you place an order for it. Tony asked, can I show the player mat? And Tony, I should mention that all the visuals for the game are in the infographic there. Let's see if they are in the infographic. Yes, actually, yeah, you can see the player mat right here in the infographic. That's a little bit easier than me pulling it out of the box right now. But this is the player mat, what it looks like here. And you can also see it in the rulebook, which is available on our website. Yeah, actually, I mentioned the apiary expansion here. The Smoking Boats Travel Guide Kickstarter is still going on. This isn't a Stonemaier Games Kickstarter, but it is related to a series of games that we're working on. And then we have our latest game-specific newsletters if you want to check those out. Let's see. Devil's Treasure says, do you have any other mechanisms on your radar to look out for on future design days? They're referencing what I said a few minutes ago about how I was looking for a I Cut You Choose game, and this game came along and really struck my fancy. But yeah, good question. Any other mechanisms that I'm on that are on my radar to look out for? So one mechanism I really love that I haven't quite, well, actually, no, that's not true. I have used that now. I was going to say, yeah. Among my favorite mechanisms, most of my very favorite mechanisms have now been covered by games that we publish. So I'm kind of looking for new stuff now. I don't think I could probably, if I dug a little bit deeper into this, I could probably find an answer. But off the cuff, most of my favorite mechanisms have been covered by games that we publish now, especially now that we're adding I Cut You Choose. Yeah. Aaron says, how much of the original design was able to make it to the final game that we see today? So yeah, the final game, or the prototype that I first played that was at Design Day, that playtesters at Design Day rated as being essentially, they rated it being publishable. They said this game is ready to be published. There were about 5 significant things that Paul and I changed after that. A lot related to how the stamps are placed into the draft. That being that some are face down, some are face up. I can't remember if Paul had special abilities at that time, but I think he did. But there wasn't a sense of progression. There wasn't engine building. So we added a little bit of engine building. And then we added, the biggest thing is that we added, the stamps were pretty balanced at that time. And balance is one of those things that you actually don't really want all that much in I Cut You Choose games. You want a pretty broad variety, especially if there's drafting involved. It's not just a random hand of cards or tiles. So we unbalanced the tiles, basically. We had these rare stamps that are worth a lot of points. We had some negative point stamps. We added, we just varied the values of the stamps quite a bit more than what they were originally. So the core structure of the game remained largely the same, but the stamps themselves changed quite a bit, I would say, after that initial prototype at Design Day. Carol says, what year was it at Design Day? 2022 is what I am recalling. I had to look this up recently too, but yeah, it wasn't last year. I think it was the year before, 2022. John says, how does the weight of Stamp Swap compare to some other Stonemaier games? That's a good question. I put it right along the lines of Between Two Castles and a little heavier than Rolling Realms. Yeah, around Between Two Castles weight. I think I put it around a 2 on Board Game Geek. So lighter game, easier to play, but a lot of depth and replayability in the different goals, the different tiles that are going to come out, and how things are cut and divided in the game. Let's see. Just scroll. I know I'm behind on comments, so I'm mostly just looking for questions right now. I'm happy to go back. If I miss something that you wanted me to talk about, feel free to always let me know. Yeah, I'm way behind on comments. Let's see. Philistine, can I use any of the cards to post real letters? You cannot use the tiles in the game to do that. Steve said, will there be rubber player mats for the game? No, we don't have plans to do rubber play mats. I think those are really good if you're picking up cards off the mat, but there's no need for that in Stamp Swap. You're just putting the tiles down on your mats. Let's see. Jacob says, how do you come up with a playtime? We take this, this is data that we asked for from playtesters. So one of the questions in our playtester poll or survey is, how long did it take to play, including setup, teaching, and cleanup? And so we use that to create the range of playing time. Yeah. And Jacob says, it seems my group always goes past the time on the box. And yeah, I think in general, I should probably bump that time up for some of our games. Some of those times are a little optimistic. But they are even taken from playtesting, and maybe that's just because playtesters are pretty good at learning on the fly and teaching on the fly. They might be a little faster than the average player. Yeah. Alistair says, are any of the stamps inspired by other Stonemaier games? You will see some little nods to Stonemaier games on the stamps, although one thing did change during the after the pre-production playtest. We decided to change a graphic design element where there were a lot of Easter eggs to Stonemaier games. I don't know if you can see, but we left them on the back of the board. So you can see there are these canceled stamps in the game that have these squiggly lines, kind of like real canceled stamps. And many of them have references to other games. It's a little hard to see right here, but this part of the stamp often referenced other places that appear in our other games, like Green Gully, or that's Charterstone, Euphoria, different places that appear in our games. And we decided that this amount of squiggly nature, as thematic as it looks, as accurate as it looks for stamps, it really gets in the way of seeing what you need to see on the stamps themselves. So we got rid of a lot of that and reduced it down to a much smaller canceled icon. So you can still find these Easter eggs on the back of the board and even on the box too. Yeah, we have that on the box, but the final version of the stamps do not have those squiggly lines on them. It's a much smaller icon. Philistine says, I played Viticulture Essential with the expansions easily over 100 times. We played it nightly during COVID. That's awesome. Will you ever have an expansion of the Vine cards? It's the smallest deck. You know, I haven't ever considered an expansion of the Vine cards themselves, but that's a neat idea. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, not something that's in the works, but it's a neat idea to consider that. I would say that, yeah, the Wine Orders and the Vine cards are the smaller decks in the games. The Visitor cards have been expanded over time. Austin said, are there any Walter or Biddy stamps? Of course there are, yeah. I think there's either one stamp with both of them or one stamp for each of them in the game. Those are my two cats, my current cat, Walter, my late cat, Biddy. Garrett says, how am I feeling? I mentioned the appendix thing. I'm feeling much better, Garrett. Yeah, I am very glad to have my appendix out after it got infected, and I'm feeling much better now. Mark says, yeah, so Mark's asking about pricing. Common question. Totally understand the question, Mark. But yeah, we typically announce pricing on the day of the launch. So you'll see the pricing then. The reason for that is that it's subject to change between now and then if we have reason to think that we should change it. And also the pricing depends on who you are. Like if you're a Stonemaier champion, you're getting a 20% discount on the pricing, but it will be on sale on our web store on September 4th. Mark is essentially asking for a range there. I would say to look at between two castles as a reference point for this. Between two castles, between two cities, both have a bunch of tiles in the game, plus a few other components. Both have, or at least Between Two Castles has an insert tray, a little bit fancier than the one in Stamp Swap, but it does have an insert tray. So yeah, you can kind of look at those games for a rough reference of what the price might be for Stamp Swap. Box People says, are there any Easter eggs that we can look out for on the stamps? Definitely. There are definitely a few Easter eggs that you can look out for there. Maybe a sneaky scythe reference. Europa is definitely mentioned on one of the canceled stamps that didn't end up in the game, like the stamp itself. So look on the back of the board for a lot of those Easter eggs. There might also be a reference. Yeah, I think there actually is a scythe reference on one of the vehicle stamps. Nate also asked about my recovery. Thank you, Nate, for asking about that. Feeling so much better and easing back into regular activity. Carol says that Orleans, one of my favorite games, is on alpha on Board Game Arena. I'm noticing that we had some minor rules wrong and that we don't have the most updated rulebook. Has BGA ever helped you make rules corrections? I think it has. Yeah, I can't think of a specific example, and I'm curious to see if we've been playing Orleans wrong. I do know, what was the game? There's some game that I love that I recently found that I've been playing incorrectly. I can't remember what it is offhand, but there was some game that I was like, oh, wow, this game that I have actively talked about how much I've loved this game for quite some time. And I still do love it, despite the thing I've been misplaying. I can't remember what it is now, though. But yeah, it was something that I've been like very frequently misplaying in this, whatever this game was. Valerie says, I played Let's Go to Japan recently. It was awesome. Should check it out for your upcoming trip. Actually, yeah, we've played. I love my copy of Let's Go to Japan, and I've played it, I think, 4 times at this point. And every time I get more ideas about things to do on the trip and things to look out for. It is focused on Tokyo and Kyoto, and two places that I've already been. I lived in Kyoto for a while, and I've been to Tokyo several times. We are going to both of those places, but we're also going to some other places because I've wanted to go someplace that I haven't already been in Japan. So that stuff doesn't appear unless go to Japan. Julio says, what codename was this? People corrected me earlier. I said it was codename Swap. That was incorrect. It's codename Keep. It was codename Keep because you are keeping some of the things that you are cutting and choosing and giving some other things away. Corey says, is this available for pre-order or is there a future launch date? Yeah, the launch date for Stamp Swap is on September 4th, with shipping to follow immediately afterward to champions and then soon after to non-champions. The Photon Mom says, have stores in your area started selling altered TCG cards yet? Not that I'm aware of, although I did back the Kickstarter. So I think my first exposure to it will be through my Kickstarter rewards. I'm looking forward to playing it on the tabletop. I've only played it on Board Game Arena so far. Paul has a nice comment here. He says, I would say that 100% of the original design was in there, and then we added some great stuff. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, the game itself, the foundation of the game, how the game flows, how the game plays, is still almost identical to that prototype that Paul brought to Design Day. It's just little tweaks and additions that that changed since then. Let's see. Brett says, I often watch videos with closed captioning. I don't know if you ever watched your videos this way, but a fun top 10 list would be the ways that CC translates Stonemaier and your first name. Yeah, it does. I've seen like the beginning of a few videos as I've been, answering comments or things like that in the future. And it has some interesting interpretations of what I'm talking about. Steven says, when will pre-order launch on your website for Stamp Swap? So it actually won't be a pre-order because it'll just be, we'll have the game in stock to sell right away. But the launch for orders for Stamp Swap and the apiary expansion will be on September 4th. And if you all forget any of this, and I'm saying this out loud, you may not remember. If you forget any of it, check out the description. The newsletter link in the description below goes to this newsletter that has information like that. So it says like schedule, the product launch will be available to everyone on September 4th. Lower down here, it mentions the apiary expansion also on September 4th. So yeah, so that information is all there. It's also on our website if you forget it and want to look it up later. I'm happy to answer that question as many times as people ask today, but I just want to let you know where to find that information in the future. Ian says, did I get the stitches out? Unfortunately, I had staples, not stitches, and I did get the staples out, and it felt great to get them out. Got those out last Thursday. Yeah. Victoria also asked, when is Stamp Swap coming out? It'll be on our web store on September 4th. And actually, the way you phrase it, I haven't answered this part of it, Victoria, but it'll also be at Essen Spiel, and it will also be available from retailers in late October. Chris says, can you show the ticket components and player boards? The player boards are a little buried in the box right now, so they're a little tough to get to, but I can show what the tickets look like. And here's the tickets. So they kind of look like they're ticket tiles here. All of them have numbers on them that are meaningful to Paul. And then we have some player cubes over on this side. Yeah, then there's a big stack of cards, a bunch of different goals and engine building cards that you can draft here, along with on the Automa is a separate bag here. Here's all the Automa cards in this bag here. Yeah. Julio says, how long has this been in the Stonemaier Games schedule? I love learning the behind-the-scenes stuff. And I do have a Tales from Production video coming out soon, along with the design diaries. This has been, I can't remember exactly when we signed it, but I saw it at Design Day 2022. So that was probably in September, October 2022. And I think we signed it fairly soon after that. Paul's saying winter 23. So maybe we didn't sign it until around January, February 2023. And I've been in the same schedule, I think, for how long we've been working on it, Julio, since after Design Day, after we signed it. Yeah. Nate says, I love that Biddy gets to live on through cameos in board games. I love that too. I love featuring my sweet Biddy boy on throughout our various games. Yeah, Stamp Swap was in progress before Biddy died. So Biddy, I don't know if the art for Biddy was in the game at that point. But yeah, we've had several games that have been in the works for a while, at least, including Vantage, been in the works for so long. And Biddy Biddy, you'll see Biddy in a number of games that were in progress when he was alive, and I'll continue to add him after, to future games as well. Joshua says that he played Wormspan this past weekend, and after just one game, his fiance was hooked. We played 6 games over the weekend. That's awesome. That's a lot of Wormspan in one weekend, but I'm glad to hear you two are having fun with it. Paul says, speaking of Easter eggs, whose idea was it to hide all the Easter eggs on the sideboard, like Thor, Little Red Riding Hood, etc.? That's all Jakob. Jakob is the one who there's a lot of stuff in that sideboard if you look closely at it. Chad says, have I started throwing discs yet after the appendectomy? I haven't yet. I've been working on so normally my daily workout, or part of it, is to do pull-ups and to run up and down the staircase in my building. And I've started like walking briskly and jogging up the staircase. Using stairs does use a lot of your core, even though it isn't putting a lot of stress on your core. And I think this weekend I will go to a shorter disc golf course and try to throw a little bit, see how it feels. Not push it too much. Kevin says, have I played Nunatak yet? I have not. No. I really like it. It looks so good on the table. I think a Stonemaier Klenko would be something very special. Hey, Kane has designed some great games, and I haven't played Nunatak, but I need to give that a try. Brett says, is there a binary dice mechanism, like 4 D6 dice that only have 0s and 1s? You can arrange the die in any order, which would allow you to have values from 0 to 15, 16 choices. So I think Brett is asking, so Stamp Swap, not a dice game. Not asking about Stamp Swap here, just to clarify. I think Brett is asking, in general, does this mechanism exist? I am not familiar with that existing, Brett. But that is a neat idea to try out. David's guess was that code name Keep might have been about keepsakes. Yeah, that's a good guess. We do try to pick words that could mean multiple things for the code name, so I can see why you would think that. And stamps are kind of a keepsake, I would say. They're in that realm of collectibles and keepsakes. Garrett says, as a designer developer, how is it working with another designer developer? That's true. Yeah, I wear both hats, and Paul wears both hats. He is a developer at Elf Creek Games. He's a designer for a variety of games. It was a pleasure. I mean, I think if you've designed multiple games and developed multiple games, you become really receptive to feedback, but you also know when to push back and be like, oh, I've tried that. Here's why I don't think that would work. And Paul was very receptive to feedback and to working on the game, actively working on the game. So it was a pleasure. A true pleasure to work on Paul in that way and to see both sides of his brain working because he had already designed the game when we found it. So we were essentially developing it together from that point on. Mark has a nice comment about the Stonemaier style of just a few releases per year, but they are quality releases. He says, I just finished reading the Stamp Shop rulebook and I'm already in love with the game. I'm glad to hear that, Mark. And to me, it feels a little crowded because we just did Rolling Realms Redux and now we're doing Stamp Swap. So I need to, and that's based around the convention schedule because we wanted to have a Gen Con release and we wanted to have an Essen release. I need to space them out a little bit more in the future, I think, and push that Gen Con release earlier, maybe 2 months before Gen Con. And then, because we found out last year, we don't want to do a release exactly at the same time as Essen. We need to do it a little bit in advance. I need to space them out a little bit more. And I appreciate you highlighting that because I really want to shine the spotlight on all the games that we work so hard on. Andrew says, did you consider the name Philately, the collection and study of postage stamps? It's a word that does come up in the rulebook. I think it's the first word of the rulebook. But no, we didn't consider it as the name. We did consider a bunch of names, but I think it's a good word, but I think a lot of people don't know what that word means and might think that it means something else. Carol says, which image on the champion shirt corresponds to Stamp Swap? I don't know if there is a specific stamp on the champion t-shirt that correlates to it, but the entire shirt for the new champion shirt, which will also be available on September 4th, is stamp themed. It looks like a big stamp album. I'm putting up my own shirt, even though that isn't on here. But yeah, I'll have to look at it to see if there is a specific stamp on the stamp shirt that is for Stamp Swap. Stephen asked, do you and the designer have a favorite stamp? Paul mentioned earlier that he likes his Bernie stamp, his dog Bernie, and the St. Louis Arch stamp. For me, it's got to be my cats. I love the cats and the gold foil chocolate stamps. Here's one of them, the rare stamps. I do love the gold foil. It feels really good when you pick a face down stamp and it happens to be a gold foil stamp. And then you get to feel a little sneaky because you're grouping that. Then another player could claim that stamp, but they don't know what it is because it's face down. I love that aspect of the game. Chad says, is it against the rules to lick the stamps you don't want other players to take? We didn't specifically put that in the rules, but I would discourage you from doing that. Or just play solo. You can play it solo as well. Zach agrees, says, will MapleSource represent Stonemaier at Essenspiel like they do at Gen Con? We do partner with MapleSource at Gen Con, but it's very much the Stonemaier booth with MapleSource as our partner there. But at Essen, no, it's a Stonemaier booth that we actually collaborate with Inside Up Games at Essen. We share a big booth with them. Edward says, how long is the wait list to get into future design days? It sounds like a really fun time. Yeah, I hope you can attend someday, Edward. It does typically, so we send out the invitation first to past attendees and then to people on the wait list. And so typically a few people from the wait list do make it on. And a lot of past attendees do attend multiple times and are always welcome back. So I don't know the exact number on that, but if you have signed up for a back in stock notification, that essentially puts you on the wait list, and you'll probably hear from us next year. Hopefully you will. Yeah. Very intrigued by Sean says, very intrigued by Stamp Swap. I was assuming the codename Keep would be a castle game. I can see that. Yeah, Castle Keep, and thought it was based in Africa when you changed the Facebook page pick. Yes, there is an animal category. The animal that we put on Facebook is an elephant. I'm sorry if it's already been asked, but what is the average time on this game? It depends on how many players, a little bit. It's mostly simultaneous, but player count does impact it a little bit, and whether or not you are teaching the game. But our range on the box is 20 to 60 minutes. And I would say it probably averages around 30 to 40 minutes. I would say 30 minutes is probably the main number. Unless you're playing at the full 5-player count, then it's going to go a little bit higher. Unless you're teaching it as well, then it's going to go a little bit higher. But a 20 is a little fast, but I think 2 players who know the game could easily play Stamp Swap in 20 minutes. Paul mentions Bernie again, and he says his favorite real stamp. Oh, real stamp in real life is a Soviet stamp honoring International Women's Day. Paul has accumulated quite a few real life stamps that he's collected while researching Stamp Swap. Edward has a question for Paul here as well. Did you have a main inspiration for choosing I cut you choose or I split you choose or any other mechanisms that were used? There is a blog post about this coming soon. Paul might answer in short here, but we do have a full design diary post about why Paul chose that mechanism. Yeah, but people have questions for Paul here. I think you'll see these questions in the design diary post, but it's also okay for you to ask. You might get short answers from Paul here in the comments. Peter says, how is the next Wingspan expansion coming along? I can't wait to complete it, which will take a while. Also, have you thought of other expansions for futures like Extinct Birds or something? Great question, Peter. Yeah. So current status of the Wingspan expansion is that Elizabeth is working on the design. I have not seen it yet, so she's still working on the foundation of the design. As for future expansions, we're going to cover 3 continents with the future expansions, including the one Elizabeth is working on. And then we're open to doing promo packs for things that those expansions miss. Things like Extinct Birds. Sometimes we miss birds in certain regions that a lot of people end up really liking. And so we're open to those as well. And if you ever have a bird suggestion, something that you want us to cover in those hypothetical future promo packs, please mention it on the Wingspan page of our website. There's a little link that you can go to, a survey, a little poll where you can ask. Well, it's not really a survey. It's a form that you fill out there where you mention the bird that you're hoping to see. And eventually someday when we're ready for that, we will go through and probably sort through that list and see which birds have been mentioned multiple times. And that'll be a key indicator to us that we need to do something, or that we might want to consider doing something with those birds. Let's see. Paul's answering one of the questions about what influenced him to do I Cut You Choose. Paul says, as I said, you'll see more in the design diary, but Reiner Knizia game called Money was very influential, though ultimately I moved away from some of those ideas. Tony says, has this type of thing happened before, and how did you guys manage that type of concern for a game? So this is when we release or we're getting ready to release a game and we find out that another publisher has a game with a similar theme to it. I think that's always going to happen. There's so many themes in gaming that have been covered by multiple games. Something similar happened with Expeditions, where actually a completely different theme, but a game by the same name was announced right close to when we were announcing expeditions. So that caused some troubles as well. Not really troubles, but it's a cause for concern, something to think about. But for Stamp Swap, it's one of those things where I'm glad that there's another stamp game that exists, because there really aren't many games that are based on this theme, and it taps so well into the idea of collecting things that I think our gamer brains, or many of our gamer brains, really enjoy. Putting together a collection of things, and in this case, cutting and choosing some of those things. So you're keeping some of the things that you cut. You're also choosing some things that other people have. So you have a lot of options to choose from. You're adding things to your collection all at once, not like one thing at a time, which is really satisfying in Stamp Swap. Let's see. Paul says, it's funny because along the design, there were a couple of games that came out while I was in ideation. This happened with Honey Buzz too. I think Penny Black has done a great job, but I didn't feel scooped or undercut. Stamp Swap has plenty going for it. That's a very gracious answer there, Paul. Icy Skater says, is there a new t-shirt coming soon? We do have our new champion t-shirt coming out in the near future. We polled Stonemaier Champions a few months ago to see how many people wanted the shirt and at what sizes. And so we ordered the shirt already based on that survey, based on that poll. And then we'll have it on our web store for Stonemaier Champions on September 4th. We did order some extras too. There is a buffer, but primarily it's for those who answered that survey. Hopefully there is a shirt for everyone who answered that survey, because we did order based on that survey. Mark says, is this game prone to analysis paralysis? I don't think so. No, it's the cutting actually happens pretty quickly, and the cutting is all simultaneous. The only part of the game that is not simultaneous, so two parts. One is the drafting. The drafting is not simultaneous, and there are a lot of options there, but I think the face down tiles actually help speed that up a little bit. And the other part is the choosing. So once you've cut the different piles, the different groups, each player has to choose one at a time. But even that goes pretty darn quickly. I have not seen it be overly prone to analysis paralysis. And I think it actually helps that you're only scoring one goal per round. So as you're putting tiles on your player mat, that might be an opportunity for analysis paralysis. But because you can focus and be like, okay, this is the round that I'm scoring this goal based on stamped colors, which are dual coded for colorblind friendliness. So if you know that you're going after that goal, then you will think about where you're placing stamps at that time based on colors. And that also ties into what stamps that you might choose and what stamps you might draft. So I think those goals really help to remove a lot of analysis paralysis from the game. Paul has a nice comment here. My reaction to the offer from Jamey was absolute elation. The game was originally designed for a different publisher in mind, but the opportunity to work with Jamey was a dream. That's very kind of you to say, Paul. Yeah, that means a lot. And it was, it's always a little, not tricky, but I worry a little bit about working with a friend. I know Paul's personality. I know how open and kind and wonderful he is. But I never want to ruin a friendship based on constructive feedback. So I found that it was a pleasure to work with Paul as well. And not really a surprise. I knew he was going to be fun to work with, but it's always good to see that you can separate that friendship a little bit and just be constructively critical when you need to be, and be open to those ideas and share those ideas back and forth. And that was a pleasure with Paul. I've also since then had the opportunity to work with another friend and had the same experience. It was a pleasure to work with this other friend as well. Oh, and Paul says this, okay, that they compensate designers very fairly. Yeah, we try to give designers what I hope is an industry-leading advance on royalties, and then we pay royalties pretty healthily after that. Joshua says, is the New Zealand-based Protected Techie in Wingspan? It isn't. This is one of the birds I've been thinking of that we probably need to add in a promo pack someday. He says, last week tonight, host John Oliver would probably love to see it make an appearance. He absolutely would. Maybe we'll send him a copy of that promo pack if we ever add it to the game. Josh says, when will you make the legacy campaign for Stamp Swap with actual stamps that you lick and stick to your board? Just kidding. Love the look already. That is kind of a pre-made legacy version of Stamp Swap right there. Very, very legacy. I guess we could do it with stickers too if we didn't want people licking stuff off their game. I don't think there's a legacy game that involves licking yet. So yeah, stickers might be the way to go for that. Oh, Dawson says that USPS has Dungeons and Dragons stamps right now, and they're electric. I'll have to check those out. My stamps right now, I have Ruth Bader Ginsburg stamps that I enjoy putting those in envelopes. I think they look great. Let's see. So Paul mentions review day. So when reviews will be available for this day for Stamp Swap, and that day will be August 23rd, I believe, is the day that I have in my head. Let's see. I have it right here. August 23rd. Yeah. So coming up really soon, those reviewers already have their copies of the game, and we're going to be sending out even more copies to reviewers. I realized that I didn't have any that went to blog reviewers or podcasters this time. Most of them are video reviews. So I need to send out some additional review copies to reviewers who have blogs. And I will do that starting tomorrow. So that I don't know if those reviews will quite be ready for the 23rd, but they will be ready hopefully by launch date, September 4th. Edward says, do you have a disc in mind for Stamp Swap? Paul, I know you play disc golf too. Is there any disc that you think fits best? There will be a disc for Stamp Swap available also on September 4th. We've already made the disc, has beautiful art from artist and other friend, Miles Bensky. And yeah, it is. I'll show it to you when we're ready to reveal it. I'll reveal it on one of the future Design Diary posts. Andrew says, are there plans in the works for more content for Red Rising or Pendulum? Not for Pendulum, but we are brainstorming some ideas. I'm working through some early concepts for something to add to Red Rising. I don't know if it'll actually become a thing yet. I haven't put it on our progress chart yet because it isn't official yet, but it is something I've been dabbling with a little bit. Tom says, can you reveal what the color of the new champion shirt will be? I know it may be a spoiler. No, it isn't a spoiler. We actually revealed the shirt in a champion update, I think 2 months ago. We wanted people to see the shirt. So it was on a champion survey. And it is it's a blue shirt, kind of a teal, bright teal shirt for Stamp Swap. Or for champions, it has a Stamp Swap theme on it. Chad says, is there a twist to the I cut you choose mechanism? The twist the main twist, in my opinion, and there are other little twists, but the main twist is that you get to reserve one of your stamps. So you draft these tiles and cards from the public supply, the public pool, and then you cut them into 2 piles. And from those piles, or really even before you have to cut them, you get to take one of those things that you drafted, other than a rare stamp, not a rare stamp, but anything else, and you get to reserve it. And so no matter what other people choose from those piles that you created, you get to keep that thing that you reserved. And I really like that. I like the I cut you choose. I like that you are giving something away and thinking about other players, what they might want and how you might balance the 2 piles so that other players find the pile more appealing that you didn't want. And then you get to keep your other pile and you get to choose a pile that another player created. I love all that. But I also love that little touch that you get to keep something for yourself that no one else can take away. That thing that you really needed for your strategy, that you drafted, that you just wanted to keep. I think that's a beautiful tweak. That was something that Paul created, that Paul added to the game, and I think it's really lovely. Let's go back to the newsletter real quick to see what else we're talking about. So Stamp Swap is the main thing, obviously. You can sign up for a launch notification. I will send a general newsletter on September 4th as well. So if you got today's newsletter, you will get a notification on September 4th as well. Champions will get a little note about it too. Apiary expansion. Let's see. You can see the big project chart for all the things that we have in the works and their current status. And yeah, I guess that's it. I didn't have much other news. Yeah, the main news this month, I do have all the typical stuff like the most read, most watched content, the best-selling products on our web store, what I've been playing lately, just some fun stuff. But yeah, mostly just Stamp Swap today. Thank you all for joining me for this. Oh, actually, Joshua says, was there a specific reason the elephant was chosen as the image on the website, Facebook? So this is something chosen by our web developer, Dave. You're right. We could have done shiny chocolate. We could have done that. But I think he chose the elephant because it was a nice vertical image. We kind of had a long vertical slot for it. And the way the elephant was oriented with a long trunk, I think Dave probably thought that was a good fit for the image. Board Game Design says, for future designers, are there any particular parameters Stonemaier Games has that vary from other studio considerations, components, board sizes, mechanisms, and such? We do have parameters that are available on the submissions page of our website. So if you go to, on our website, go to About, and then go to Submissions and Pitches. You'll see the types of things that we're looking for and the types of things that we're not looking for, with one of the big ones being that our games must play from 2 to 5 players, and we'll add the solo mode later, but they must play from at least 2 to 5 players. They must be play tested at those player counts as well. But there are other parameters and guidelines that you can find if you look at the submissions page of our website. Yeah, thanks for asking about that and for maybe considering us as a publisher. So I think that's it for today. Obviously, we have a lot of news to share about Stamp Swap in the coming days. I'll post design diary posts for the next 10 days. I probably won't do the weekend, but I'll do every other day. And so stay tuned for that. And you can also just check out the rulebook and the infographic, all the stuff that we already have on our website about the game. I am so excited. Paul, thank you for joining the livecast today. Designer Paul Solomon joined us for the entire livecast. I really appreciate that. And we'll be back in the coming days for videos, design diary posts, a lot of content about Stamp Swap, and then reviews on August 23rd. Take care. Have a great day.